Summer's still here.
And, of course, we got our guys, Domonique Foxworth, Damien Woody. Damien Woody, congrats on the babies. We'll get into that in just a bit. We'll share those pictures a little later. And, Nick, great to have you as well. Guys, I want to mention also CM Punk's going to be here.
Okay.
We're going to be talking to him.
Okay.
You ready for that interview? Because you're a part of it.
I am.
Okay, you have your questions
I've never
ready?
been more ready.
Okay, that's
I've
good.
got a whole litany of questions.
You know who else is here? We got some Boston guys.
One of the greatest actors of all time.
Matt Damon
Yeah.
is joining us, and Casey Affleck.
Have you seen The Martian?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Casey Affleck's with him too?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe talk a little Boston sports.
Casey Affleck, sneaky good.
Yeah.
Sneaky
Do you have
actor.
questions prepared for that as well? Okay, because you need to step
I grew up on those guys.
Okay, you got to step in for this guy, so just making sure. You're my PIC today.
Probably
so
the easiest thing of the summer.
So let's make it happen.
What's PIC?
Partner in crime.
Oh.
Oh my gosh, guys, help him.
Did
All
your
right.
partner in crime spill?
Okay, let's go. You heard Aaron Rodgers. He's not playing around. Saturday, Jets quarterback and star wide receiver Garrett Wilson were seen having an argument during practice. Then yesterday, Rodgers was visibly upset throughout a sloppy practice. Aaron threw an interception that went off wide receiver Allen Lazard's hands, struggled to corral some erratic snaps from center Joe Tippmann, and went down after being tripped by one of his offensive linemen. Here's his tight end, Tyler Conklin, on his new quarterback.
That's the beauty of playing with, a great like that, right? Like you have someone that's going to, at all times, hold everybody accountable no matter who you are, what happens. I think that's really a blessing at the end of the day, to be able to have someone that cares that much, has a standard like that, that's going to, that becomes our standard as a team. But to have a Hall of Famer that's won a Super Bowl, been there, done that, I think that really is, it's necessary.
All right, Dan, you heard Aaron Rodgers. You heard what he said. If he didn't feel like he couldn't be the best quarterback in the league, win a Super Bowl, he would not still be playing. He's not ready to go off into irrelevance. How important is it for this offense to get off to a fast start, though, with how thick the AFC is?
It's huge, and realistically, through their first 5 games, the Jets at worst should be sitting at 4-1. I understand that they open on the road Monday Night Football versus the 49ers. Very good football team, but their next 4 are absolutely winnable games. We're talking the Tennessee Titans, New England Patriots, Broncos, and Minnesota. So you're talking potentially 3 rookie quarterbacks and also a young quarterback in Will Levis. Then their schedule gets dicey, and you can sit and go bye week 12. You'd hope the Jets are sitting at 7-4. Buffalo and Pittsburgh after that relatively easier stretch, and then New England sandwiched in between Houston. So the schedule sets up for them to be able to get off to a good start, minimum 4-1 after their 5. But I think 2 other reasons why. Number one, because of that missed training camp that became that public conversation and the way that it was communicated by Robert Saleh and, well, Aaron's not here and he's in Egypt or whatever. And I said when it happened, it's not a big deal unless they struggle. And if they struggle, people will point back because they're in that situation where people want them to fail. People will point back and be like, well, you should have been at minicamp instead of being in Egypt. And then the second thing is this. I disagree with the premise, but the last time that we saw Aaron Rodgers in 2022, everyone thought he didn't play well. And it was coming off of those back-to-back MVP seasons. So people are going to sit there and go, well, the last time we saw this guy play in 2022, he didn't play that good, even though he did. And he wasn't there in minicamp, and he's not all in, and how he's just making a mockery, and he's running the organization into the ground. So it is paramount for them, both in the public perception world, to get off to a good start, but also the reality of football world with the way their schedule is set up, and we know how thick the NFC or AFC is when how many quarterbacks and teams are really high end. So I think a fast start is huge for this football team.
Yeah, the AFC's tough, and a fast start would be nice, but I guess I have more faith in Aaron Rodgers and the mental toughness of this team because they've been tested a bunch over the last few years. They started out last year 1-4. In their final 5 games, they went 3-2. And they had many reasons to give up. And the year before, they had several reasons to give up. I'm not concerned about this team. I'm not concerned about Aaron Rodgers having a fast start. His last MVP season, I think their first game, they lost 38-3, and he went on to have an MVP season. Like, I have respect for their mental toughness. I do think everything Dan said is right. People are waiting for them to fail, and if they do get off to a slow start, the noise is going to get loud. But what they've proven, I think, in the last few years is that that doesn't really matter. That defense didn't really falter last year too often, despite the fact that they knew they were going out there and not getting any support from the offense. So I'm not concerned about them from a psychological standpoint or them from a media conversation or the noise around them standpoint, but where Dan pointed out their schedule, that's a little scarier because if they get off to a rough start against some of the weaker teams that they're going to face on their schedule, it's going to be tough to bounce back. However, they're going to have to beat those teams at some point. You're not going to win a Super Bowl without beating the Bills, without beating the Chiefs, without beating the Ravens. At some point, they're going to have to go after these big-name teams and be able to beat them, whether they beat them in the regular season first to prove that they can do it or in the postseason when they absolutely have to. I don't think it matters. I think they need to be prepared and playing their best football at the end of the season because we all know the difference in championship teams. Everyone in the NFL is pretty close in talent as far as talent is concerned. There's some small things that separate them, and sometimes it's health and injuries. Sometimes it's one player playing slightly above their head at a certain moment or guys just blacking out, making good decisions. But it's always 4 or 5 plays through the course of a game that change it. And I think that the Jets will be fine whether they start off slow or they start off fast. They'll be okay as long as everyone can stay healthy and they can play well towards the end of the season.
Yeah, listen, as somebody who's played in this market, I think it's going to be pretty important for them to start off fast. And I think Dan brings up the schedule, and that's a good point. But more importantly, it's because of the media here in this market. Think about this. Everything as it relates to Aaron Rodgers has been talked about, everything off the field. Whether it was the vice president stuff, the trip to Egypt, all those things have been fodder here in the New York media. But none of it has been talked about Aaron Rodgers and what he has done on the field, obviously because of the injury he suffered in the 4th play of the game, last year in the 2023 season. So I think, moving forward, I think it's going to be very important just for this Jets organization because trust me, as someone who's played, for this organization, media stuff is very important. It draws a lot of energy towards this organization. So I think it's going to be really important for this team to get off to a quick start, get off to a fast start, because I think it'll invigorate this organization. The last thing you need is this organization is, the Jets start off slow with that schedule. Everyone's going to start rehashing all the things that Aaron Rodgers has done or the things that Aaron Rodgers has said prior to him stepping on the field in 2024.
It's also the reality of, when we go back to 3 years ago or 4 years ago when Aaron Rodgers wants out of Green Bay, It was, oh my gosh, what teams are the right situations to go get a quarterback that's coming off of MVP seasons or whatnot, all that. And we were all many Broncos. Okay, so that doesn't happen. Then the acquisition happens for Aaron Rodgers. And everyone was like, this is the dice roll by the Jets, because we all felt that the Jets were a pretty good roster at that point. And I know they've added to the offensive line, but a pretty good roster at that point. And Joe Douglas, who's their general manager, was like, no, I'm going to go get a quarterback now because we believe that we're a quarterback away. I compare it a little bit to the Russell Wilson situation. The Russell Wilson trade for the Denver Broncos is widely viewed as one of the worst trades in the history of the NFL. If this doesn't go well for the Jets, this has in that conversation for being one of the worst trades in the history of the NFL. The Jets traded for a guy that was a 2 out of 3 year MVP winning quarterback. If they don't get anything for it, this is going to go down, and Joe Douglas's resume is like a complete disaster. This is one of the best defenses the Jets have in the NFL. You're going to waste Sauce Gardner. You're going to waste Quinnen Williams. You're going to waste some of this defensive talent. Garrett Wilson is one of the best receivers. I'll stand on that. Not young, best. If this doesn't go well, we're then wasting the young years of some of this young talent.
We need to dive into that because that's a hot take right there. Nick, do you agree that this could potentially be one of the worst trades in NFL history and go down with some of the ones Dan mentioned?
I mean, I think it would be pretty terrible if they don't make a run at some point. I do think, though, it's kind of unfair to grade the trade a little bit well after it's done. No one thought it was a bad idea when it happened. Whether his Achilles pops or not, that's not Joe Douglas's fault. And I get it. The results are the results. At the end of the day, you can say this was one of the worst trades ever if they go on to not make the playoffs this year. If it all falls apart and they have no success, you can't argue that it was a good trade. But you also can't argue that it was a good decision. Nobody at the time was like, oh, You're getting a two-time MVP quarterback, one of the greatest of all times, to add to what looked like the best defense in football, at least the season before they got Aaron Rodgers. We all were like, yeah, do that. I would do that 100 times out of 100, but that's part of football. Like, the guys are going to get hurt. Things are going to happen, but it's not a risk that I thought was not worth taking, considering that they were on the doorstep and considering that we saw a similar thing like that work in Los Angeles. You go get Matt Stafford to add to a talented roster. You've seen it work before. You can go back to Peyton Manning when he jumps on to that Broncos team. Like, it's a thing that seems reasonable. It doesn't seem like an absurd move, even if it turns out to be a failure. And I guess the same thing could be true for the Broncos decision. We didn't think that was as crazy until we saw how bad it looked.
Woody, what would it make it not a failure? Because right now, ESPN Bet has them projected at 9.5 wins this season, this Jets team.
Take the over.
Yeah, listen, you got to at least get, for me, like minimum, like divisional round, conference championship, if you're the Jets team. Listen, you make a trade for Aaron Rodgers, okay? You make a trade for Aaron Rodgers. Like, the Jets expect the quarterback to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and when you consider all the pieces around Aaron Rodgers, this is the best defense that Aaron Rodgers has ever had in his whole career. Think about that. This is going to be the best defense that he's ever had in his whole career, backing him up. Okay, if the Jets don't do major damage, get in the postseason and do major damage, it's a failure in my opinion. Completely, it's a failure. The whole regime of Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, they'll be gone if the Jets don't make hay in the postseason.
I think it's a Super Bowl. I've been adamant about that.
Yeah.
It's a Super Bowl appearance. Now, if you want to tell me they go to the AFC Championship.
A Super Bowl appearance this season?
No, during the tenure. So in the next 2 years, realistically, just to put this into context a little bit more what he is saying. Okay, Aaron Rodgers in his career is 80-2 when his defense gives up less than 20 points in the game. Okay, the Jets defense in the last 2 years has given up on average 19 points per game. Rodgers has never, ever led a team to score less than 20 points a game. His worst year was in 2022. They scored 21 a game. So just taking a quarterback that has never scored less than 20 over the course of a season and pairing him with the defense that doesn't give up over 19, you're automatically sitting there go, this is the perfect match. And then to take this a step further, under Robert Saleh since 2021, the New York Jets have had the lead in the fourth quarter 19 times. In that 3-year span. That's the second least in the NFL. Yet they've still been one of the best defenses in the NFL. Nick, you know how much changing a defense playing with the lead in the fourth quarter, how much it changes. They've actually had the lead at any point in the game under Robert Saleh 26 times. That is by far the least amount in the NFL over that span. So we are talking about a defense that has been remarkably good.
Yeah.
And they finally have a quarterback that gives them the chance to be in a position that they've never been in. Can you imagine Sauce Gardner in the fourth quarter up 10 going like, oh, you guys got to throw it every play? You're going to see a secondary that hunts the ball more than they ever have, and a pass rush that hunts quarterbacks more than they ever have. It's totally fair to sit there and say this should be a team that makes it to the Super Bowl and absolutely into the